right. So last class I did my starter question and it took 10 minutes of my video time. So this one I'm not gonna make it too long. Uh, because I'm not gonna do it in two different ways. Again, we have to find the x and y intercept. Okay, so I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail. Remember, x intercept means that you have to replace y by 0 and solve for x, and y intercept means that x is equals to 0, and then you can solve for y. Okay, that's what you can do over here. That's one way of doing it. And another way would be the way that I'm gonna show you. Is to just solve for y. Okay, so write the function in this form. Y is equals to mx plus b. Then this will be your x. This will be your y-intercept, right? And then you can solve for the x-intercept separately. Okay, so let's do that. So again, there's many ways of doing it, right? So if you could move the 6 minus 6x over plus 18 over, so this would become 2y. The minus 6x will become plus 6x, right? This is a shortcut, right? But basically what you're doing is you're doing plus 6x on both sides, okay? But I'm just going to rely on the shortcut over here, save some time, and then the plus 18, the sign will change. It will become minus 18. And then you have to divide this by 2, right? To have y all by itself. Remember, the coefficient of y has to be 1. So then you have to divide the whole thing by 2, okay? So when you divide the whole thing by 2, then you have to divide both the 6 and the 18 by 2. So this will cancel out. And you're gonna get y is equals to 3x, right? 6x divided by 2 is 3x. And then 18 divided by 2 is 9, so minus 9, okay? Um, and there you go. Okay, so that means that my y-intercept, right, just by looking at this function, my y-intercept is just equals to y is equals to negative 9. Again, you could plug in x is equals to 0 and solve for it, right? But I'm just gonna save some time and do that. X-intercept means when I have to replace my y value by 0. So let's do that. So I'm gonna replace this y value by 0 and then just solve for x. Okay, so so that means I have to do plus 9, plus 9. So this will disappear, and then you're gonna get 9 is equals to 3x. And finally divide by 3, and then divide by 3. So your x-intercept is, so this will cancel out, right? So x is equals to 3, right? And now if I were to list this as a coordinate, then this would be the point where x is 0, y is negative 9. And this would be the point where x is 3 and y is 0, okay? So this is how you find your x and y intercept. So this will be my final answer. So my y-intercept is y is equals to 9, and my x-intercept is x is equals to 3. But as a coordinate, right, this is what you have. And as a coordinate for the y-intercept, this is what you have, okay? So there you go. I didn't want to make this too long. Again, there's many ways of doing it. The other way would have been to just not solve for y, kind of like what I did over here. Don't solve for y. Don't do this. Just plug in y is equals to 0, and then solve for x to get your x-intercept. Um, and for the y-intercept, plug in x is equals to 0 in this function, and then solve for your y value. Okay, so that's another way of doing it. And I kind of did that in my previous starter question. Okay, so you can have a look at that. Um, but I think this might be the fastest way of doing it. Anyway, so yeah, this hopefully kind of makes sense. Again, I went over it a little bit too quickly because I wanted to spend more time on this stuff. So this class is going to be a review of everything we've done so far. Okay, so sketching x and y intercept, domain and range, and then finally your positive and negative intervals. Okay, so question A is asking you to find the x and y intercept. Y intercept is really easy when you have this form. Okay, so when you have the form, you know, y is equals to mx plus b, then this just becomes your y-intercept, right? So we don't have to do any calculation, right? So y-intercept is just y is equals to minus 5. And the x-intercept, so for the x-intercept, I'm going to do the calculation on the right over here. So x-intercept means, right, x-intercept means that I have to replace my y value by 0 and solve for x, okay? So, right, and then if you do the algebra, right, then I guess I'm gonna do this for you. So This disappears, and then you're going to get 5 is equal to 2x, and then just divide by 2 on both sides. Divide by 2, so then x, right, is equals to 2.5. Now, I'm just, making up this question so that, your fractions, your decimals look nice. Your x-intercept and y-intercept don't have to be nice looking decimals. Okay, they could be anything in general, but, just to make the calculations look a little nicer, or the final answer look a little nicer, I should say, I'm just intentionally making up the question so that you get nice looking decimals, right? But if you were dividing this by 3 or something, then you're going to get ugly decimals, in which case I'm going to ask you to just leave your answer as a fraction, okay, if that ever happens on a test. Now the sketch, right? Sketch is very straightforward. Um, so for the sketch, if you want, you can write this on the side. So my slope m is equal to 2, so my function should be increasing, right? And you know that your y-intercept b value is -5. So basically, right, at 0, your function is at -5. So and then, let me just do this like that, and then when your x value is 2.5, your function becomes 0, and then you just connect the two dots. Okay, so basically your function will look something like this. Okay, it's supposed to be a straight line. Okay, so this is the point. If you want, you don't have to put the points, you can just say that this is -5, right? This is where your y, so label your axis. So this is x, this is y. So this is where y is -5. Maybe let me do this in red. So y is -5 over here, and x over here is 2.5. Okay, and if you want, you could put the coordinates, but this is good enough for me. Okay, and again, this point is the point that's going to be very important when it comes to finding um, your positive and negative intervals. Okay, so x-intercept is what we're looking for. Now, when it comes to domain and range, okay, with this function, because it is not stopping, right, it's going in both, it's continuing in both directions. There is no minimum, there is no maximum, right? So when it comes to domain, remember domain is expressed in terms of x. So domain is basically from -infinity, right, to, right, so my minimum value is -infinity, my maximum value is positive infinity, right? There is no restriction on your x, okay? So another way of writing this is um, x, so or x belongs to all real numbers, okay? So x belongs to all real numbers, and it's the same thing for your range, okay? When it comes to linear function, this will basically always be your answer, which is why I gave you domain and range questions last week separately so that you can kind of like practice that. But again, when you're talking about your y values, right, there is no minimum y value because your function goes on forever and ever and ever. And there is no maximum y value either, right? Because your function goes on forever and ever. So your y value, right? So your range, your minimum x value is -infinity. But remember, range is expressed in terms of y, right? So y less than positive infinity, or you can just say that y belongs to all real numbers. Okay, so domain and range will always be xer, yer if you want for linear functions, but don't just put xer and yer, just ask yourself why is it xer and yer. Okay, so positive and negative, right? So my function is positive here, and for these x values, right? So it starts at 2.5 and it's moving towards the right. So my function is positive as long as my x value is greater than or equals to 2.5, and my function will be negative. Okay, it's negative down here. Again, my y values are negative, right? So down here, but for which x values are my y values negative? Well, as long as my x values are less than or equals to 2.5, my y values will be negative, okay? So positive, negative. So this kind of, like I said, combines everything together. And again, if you're struggling with any of these concepts, please send me an email or join me Thursday during class time for to get more help, okay, during my office hours. Okay, so now let's do a couple of more, and then the other ones will be homework. So again, because it's expressed in the form y is equals to mx plus b, um, finding the y-intercept is very easy, right? That's your y-intercept. So y-intercept is just y is equals to 3. And again, by definition, this means that your x value has to be 0, right? So if you plug in x is equals to 0 in this function, right, then you're going to get, right? So if I replace x by 0, I'm going to get minus 0 plus 3, but minus 0 is 0, right? So this is where the 3 comes from. Or you could just look at this value, okay, however you want to do it. Just know the definition, okay? Y-intercept means x is 0, okay? So maybe I should point this out. Y-intercept means x is equals to 0, okay? Now for the x-intercept, right? X-intercept means that your y has to equal to 0. So let's calculate the x-intercept on the side over here. So x-intercept, right, happens when y is equals to 0, right? So I'm going to have to replace y by 0 and just solve for x. So I'm going to get 0 is equals to minus x plus 3. Now there's many ways of doing this, okay? One way to solve for x is just move the x over to the other side and it will automatically become positive, right? So that means that x is equals to 3, okay? Or you could do minus 3, and then divide by negative 1. That's also going to work. So this is my x-intercept, and that's my y-intercept. Okay, so this is my y-intercept, right? And this is my x-intercept, okay? Now the sketch, right? I can quickly sketch this using the x and y-intercept and understanding how my slope works. So, so my slope is equals to minus 1. That means my function will decrease. My b value, you can kind of think of that as your starting point, is equals to 3. So I am over here at 3, right? And because my slope is negative, my function is actually going to decrease. But now I know what my x-intercept is, right? And my x-intercept is actually 3. And then you just have to connect the two dots, okay? So this is when y is equals to 3. And this is when x is equals to 3. Okay, so both of them are same in this case, right? So this is the point coming from here, right? This is the point. This one over here comes from there. So x is 0, y is 3, and this is the point that's coming from here, right? So x is 3, y is 0. Normally they're not the same, but in this case they just happen to be, okay? Again, this point will be very, very useful, right? The x-intercept is very useful when it comes to finding the positive and negative intervals. So again, domain, right? From minus infinity to positive infinity. There's no restriction on the x, so x belongs to all the real numbers. And my range is, yeah, let me just stick with green, I guess. So my range is y belongs to all the real numbers, okay? So, and I've shown you in the first example y is it xer and yer, okay? And if you want, you can put the negative infinity, positive infinity stuff. It's whatever makes you comfortable, okay? Now, when is my function positive? When are the y values of my function positive, right? In other words, when is my function above the x-axis? It's above the x-axis over here, right? And these are the x values that make my function positive. So, right, I'm moving towards the left. I'm starting at 3. So that means my function is positive when my x values are less than or equals to 3, right? And so it has to be negative over here, okay? So my function is negative when my x values are greater than or equals to 3, okay? Everything is expressed in terms of x. The only thing that's expressed in terms of y is always your range, okay? So just be careful with the range. That's always expressed in terms of your y. Everything else will be in terms of x, okay? So yeah, so that is it. Now this is a constant function, right? So I would just quickly sketch this because it's really easy to sketch a constant function. So let's do that down here. My y value is a constant. It's always 10. So my function will be a flat function, right? So maybe let me use a different color. So this is 10 and then something like this, okay? So constant function, okay? So this is the value. This is when my y value equals to 10, okay? So do I have a y-intercept? Yes, I do, right? My y-intercept is just this point over here. So y-intercept is y is equals to 10. Now I don't have an x-intercept, right? I don't have an x-intercept because my function never touches the, right? So if you think about it, let me be consistent with my class. My function will never touch the x-axis, so there's never going to be an x-intercept, okay? And I've shown you in the previous video why, right? Because your algebra wouldn't work either, because remember, x-intercept means that your y value has to equal to 0, right? So if you replace y by 0 in this function, you're going to get 0 is equals to 10, which is a contradiction, right? This doesn't make any sense. So that's why there is no x-intercept, but graphically you can kind of see it as well, okay? So x-intercept will be, you can just say, no x-intercept, I guess, in this case, okay? So no um, x-intercept, okay? Now domain and range, right? There is no dot, like it's not starting from here and then stopping there. It continues on forever and ever and ever. Okay, so my domain, be careful, my domain will be x belongs to all real numbers. But my range is tricky, right? Range, what about my y values? It's not going to be yer, okay? Don't do this, okay? Don't do this because remember, your function, how many y values is your function attaining? It's only attaining one y value, right? It's always equals to 10. Now when your function has a positive slope, then it touches all the y values, right? It touches all of them, all the y values. But in this case, it's only touching one y value, and that y value is 10. Okay, so range is equals to y is equals to 10 if you want. Okay, so this is your range because your function is not attaining any other y value besides 10, right? And the graph kind of shows that to you. Okay, so when you're finding domain and range, make sure you're looking at the sketch to answer this question. I've kind of like arranged this for you, right? X and y intercepts help you to sketch. Your sketch helps you to find the domain and range, and your sketch also helps you to find positive and negative um, intervals. Okay, so I've arranged the question for you so that you can easily answer. Once you have part A, you can answer B, and then so on and so forth. Okay, so when is it positive? When is my function above the x-axis? When are my y values positive? Okay, my function is positive all the time. Okay, so my function is positive as long as, for all x values, right? As long as x belongs to x can belong to any real number and your function will be positive. Okay, so when is it negative? X belongs to an empty set. Okay, so you could say that, or your function is always positive, right? You could just say this in English. And when is it negative? It's never negative because it's never below the x-axis, right? Your function never goes below the x-axis, right? It's never so let me just do this a little differently. So you're not gonna see something like this with your function. So let me just erase this. So your function is not going to behave like this, okay? And you're not going to, okay, that's actually not a function, but something like this. Your function will never go below the x-axis, right? It's not even going to touch the x-axis, which is why you don't have an x-intercept. So that's why it belongs to the empty set, okay? So the empty set means that there is no x value that makes your function negative, okay? So never or x belongs to the empty set, okay? So again, these are just notations. Just familiarize yourself with them because eventually you're going to see them, okay? So for homework, again, I am not going to do this for you. I'm going to ask you to do this on your own, but I will be posting the notes with everything that I've done in this video. So the filled in notes will get posted along with the homework solutions. Okay, so make sure you do these 3 questions to practice a little bit, and then compare your answers to my solutions. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or join me on Thursday during my office hours. Okay, so that is it for this week. I'm not gonna make this too challenging because I think some students need some catching up to do. So please use your time wisely. And if you have any concerns, again, just send me an email. Okay, so take care, guys.